Yes, the virtual gavel at the meeting. We have a quorum. Jen can't be with us tonight. Unfortunately, she came down with COVID in her family.
Oh, no. Oh, poor thing.
Don't know if you saw her email, Jen. She'd like to watch the recording because she's sorry to miss the orientation tonight. I don't have a public hearing on here, but we'll note public meeting. We don't see anybody online or in the room. So, Karen, David, do you want to do the introductions here?
Yes, then I will, yes. So Sharon Morris, some of you, I know she met John because she came and did a presentation to the Library Commission about district formation back in 2016. It was part of like the commission. But so Sharon is formerly with the State Library in some capacity. She left the State Library, got a PhD in organizational development, and then at some point recently, we were so pleased that she came back to the State Library. And so you can tell me a little bit more about your role. So Sharon is kind of like the person for years, really, the State Library has helped out with trustee development, commission development, works on things like training for them, and also just evaluations of them. So very pleased. I've done Sharon since I got to Colorado 16 years ago, I think. So,
Sure. Thank you. It's a delight to be here. I'm going to ask you all to go around and introduce yourselves, but I just want to say right off the bat, congratulations. It's a long time coming. So, good for you. And not only did you make this significant change happen, it will ripple for years to come in terms of a strong library district. You're really committing a lot of your time to being the ones that really are making the decisions that, I mean, you're not making decisions for the next day or the next month, you're making decisions that will impact the library district for years to come. So thank you for your role in volunteering your time for this significant community shift. So with that in mind, I thought it'd be great to just go around and have each of you introduce yourself and maybe say one thing that's been a surprise to you since you joined the new library district.
I'll start.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I'm a trustee. I don't know if we're going to have our guests. But my name's Doug Hamilton. I co-chaired the campaign with the district with Johnny and James Wilson out here and Juanita Gomez and a slew of like 50 volunteers. So one thing that surprised me, I guess shouldn't surprise me, is how long it took us to get from the election to appointing the board, I guess. Like 6 months, and that was, I don't know, feel a little bit behind the 8 ball because we want to get this set up as fast as possible. Yeah.
So, Johnny Teeter, former commissioner, library champion. The thing that has really surprised me is how difficult it is to open a bank account. I had no idea.
That's fair.
Yeah, I mean, there's just layers upon layers upon layers. So.
And that's all?
Yeah.
I know. Benita Duran, I'm a library commissioner and now a trustee. And what surprised me is how efficient we can actually be in our process. And that's becoming, I don't know, in my mind, easier to consider now that we have our pace about us. So.
I'm Kara O'Brien. I was on the library district, for the Citizens Advisory Committee before this, and the I think I was going to say the same thing as Benita. I've been surprised by how we've been able to get through things. I think when we first met, I was sort of surprised by the volume of things that had to get done. I think I hadn't quite realized the how nitty gritty our role was going to be. But I think then I've been since pleasantly surprised by how we've been able to get through it already quickly. So.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Weirba. I am on the Library Commission, and I'm the liaison to the Library Foundation. I would say that I was going to say the same thing, so I'm going to not repeat it. What I think is surprised me is how well prepared we've been, just in the sense of we have a roadmap that was created long before we got together. And, when I started thinking about all of the things that we were going to have to do, I was it could be overwhelming when you really unpack it. And I mean, I'm surprised that we had such a great roadmap in place, thanks to David and Jennifer and everybody who's kind of started well before. So.
I'm Sam Fuqua, former library commissioner for the Library Champions campaign, and I don't have anything really surprising yet. Got a parking ticket after that meeting. Maybe parking was free.
Oh, you missed
But,
it.
other than that, I think so far so good, and it was a great team, and really from me for a loop yet.
And
So,
we've all got parking tickets now.
yeah, so it's not free on this side?
It is, you have to put that thing in, do you got that thing I gave you?
Oh, yeah.
You put that on the dashboard.
Okay.
You put the thing on the dashboard, it's free.
Yeah, all right.
Put the thing on the dashboard, then it's free, otherwise it's not free. It's free for 90 minutes.
It's really expensive.
Good to know, yeah.
I'm getting it. Yeah.
Probably. I am surprised at how quickly, I mean, the pace, I kind of knew that there was the heavy duty, but they've jumped in. And honestly, I started to think last week or so that this is such an extreme kind of commitment that they're all going to have to go through trustee therapy, counselor towards December to start talking about well, we're not meeting every week. What am I going to do with my time? I miss Doug. But yeah,
We'll wonder what's for dinner on the Or maybe we will.
You'll just find us wandering downtown on Tuesday nights.
It's such a great group. There are so many ways that it could all go wrong. So, and Jen as well is not here. It's just a great group of people who have the ability to stuff quickly.
Oh, I sent a packet of information, which I sent to you, but I did have a couple of print versions, if you want some.
Did you send this electronically?
It's in the
Meeting packet.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure it wasn't something.
It's in your packet.
Yeah, we have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it electronically.
Well, I have the pretty version.
Oh.
Okay, and so we're just gonna get started, and how much time do I have? Because we have some other things. on the agenda.
90 minutes is good. Good.
Great. So you can see our outcomes really are multifold. I think that the idea here is that even though you're digging in deep to a lot of kind of structural things, this is sort of stepping back and getting an overall picture of your role as a trustee. Many of you served on the library commission, so this would be new to you, but wanted to cover the awareness of kind of basics, the library values and ethics, for trustees' responsibilities, as well as tools for your own kind of self-assessment and reflection, knowledge of some legal considerations for public libraries, even though I'm nervous sitting next to the camera like that, and awareness of some resources that we have. So this is kind of a packet that may not be as relevant right now, but is something that we're going to just kind of breeze through, and then but you can come back to at different times to kind of look through and see. So I'd like to to start out with those quick introductions and then move into various activities, the idea being that we move you around, have you talk to each other, get to know each other a little bit in a different kind of informal way, and then do report out. So this is more of a discussion than we don't do governance. Election. Which there's nothing wrong with that, but so in keeping with that, the second page is a chart we like to use with the mindsets, the fixed and the growth mindset. If you're an educator or other, you might be familiar with this. But I'm going to just have you glance through this fixed versus growth mindset, and the idea is, at least for the next, what is it now, 75 minutes or so, I'm going to try to approach our conversations with the growth mindset. So I'm going to let you look through that fixed versus growth mindset really quickly and just see what pops out that makes you think, oh, that would be helpful for our evening together. To give you a few minutes.
Mistakes. We have lots of, decisions to make, and I'm sure we'll make mistakes. Picking them as learning opportunities.
So what about that mistakes resonates with you?
I just think we have a rather large budget, and we have a lot of decisions to make and balancing different priorities, and I don't know if we're gonna fully make everyone happy with any of the decisions. Like we're always gonna probably upset someone, and so I think that listening and understanding and trying to bend is probably helpful.
Yeah, so rather than trying to avoid those mistakes, just knowing that it's an ethical process and tend to mistake recovery.
Right.
Yeah. What else?
The effort piece speaks to me. The notion of especially trying to improve rather than looking good. I'm trying to learn Italian right now as my way to stave off dementia. And it's definitely improve, not good. So.
Sort of interested in this concept of growing potential. To me, that like grammatically feels contradictory. So I'm interested in that concept of the idea that you can sort of growing potential. I think that's interesting, and I think also, like they've all said, I think there's going to be a lot of growth that's going to have to happen here on this board.
Yeah, I kind of wrapped that a little bit, actually. This kind of came to me when I was in my doctoral program, and I flew back to Simmons to meet with my major professor, and I had done everything I could possibly think of. Showed up in his office, and he was like, yeah. And I was just devastated, because it was like, well, I mean, I gave it my all. It's not right. And, called a few friends and my husband and cried and went home. And then the next morning I woke up and I had some new ways of thinking about it. So I think our society is sort of, thinks that like there's a certain amount of potential when you get there. But the more you achieve and grow your skill, you actually can increase your capacity to do more. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It's just I had never thought about it that way. I think it's interesting.
Any other aspect about potential that I think this is sort of newer research than the rest of it? this realization that people are stronger together. And so actually potential is strengthened when people are working together, which you all are experiencing right now, right? As you work on these different projects, you're in subcommittees, and if you were to just be handed the things and do it, you'd be like, but because you're working with a couple of people, then they bring different aspects to it, it actually increases your ability to, so, which is kind of counterintuitive to the way you've been sort of raised, right? Anything else?
Add something on the potential piece from a collaboration standpoint, because you were talking about potential, sort of this way. And my experience working collaboratively is it expands potential this way, because I get sort of new ways of looking at things. I've seen different ways people explain this, the prism with different sides, or I think it was Virginia Satir who had basically a koosh ball kind of idea. We have all these, and collaboration opens up these sort of sideways things that to me are very enriching, and expand the capacity for what we do, but also expand at least how I see the world. Yeah, I've always liked working in teams. My professional world, we always worked in teams whether we wanted to or not, so I learned to love them.
Yeah, thank you.
I think about the feedback piece just because and this kind of ties into what Doug was saying earlier, like we aren't going to make everybody happy, and we are going to have to accept that there are going to be people in the community who will be unhappy with us, and how we process that, I think, is going to be important.
Yeah, that's great.
I think what's interesting about that too is we're an appointed body, right? And so we, don't, not elected, and so you don't feel that obligation to your constituents or those that you think voted for you, right? And so it's interesting to think about how a group together like processes that, and who's accountable, and what's the accountability, which leads me to think about challenge, because I am always looking for the unique challenges of what we're doing and what I'm personally doing and what I'm doing with the group of people. And though, as you were saying before about Sylvia, about the aspects of this that had like a lot of background info and a lot of legwork that had been done in shaping this effort, I'm still looking for the elements that will make this uniquely Boulder, right? And to have our unique Boulder stamp on it that isn't, just because there are all these other 58 other districts or how many others there are in the state, that there's still going to be something unique that I'm going to try to find in our Boulder way of doing things. And I just feel like that's my obligation to the people of Boulder, because we like to think we're very unique and very special. And I want to show us that in how we shape this district.
So in Carol Dweck's book on mindset, she sort of says in certain contexts, we can be more in a growth mindset, and in other contexts, we can be more fixed mindset. Like, I love your example, Jody, is when you're learning a new skill, it could be easy to get into a fixed mindset of like, oh, I can't do it. But then there may be other things where you just like are always in the groove and you're totally in a growth mindset with it. How do you, when you approach this, or if you notice somebody else in kind of a fixed mindset, what is the way to move them into a growth mindset? Maybe some strategies.
I always try to play with imagination and vision. Like, I think people tend to find them as they walk through life, walking down a hallway without any doors. And I think you have to have them imagine a door or a vision to and see themselves in walking through it to, you know, get them to understand where you're coming from.
I love that image, the door, because it's sort of a reframing the wall into a hallway with options, right?
That wasn't totally mine, I don't think. The other people that I think I took that from like Miriam Kaba. So if I credit people here, so.
This idea of kind of a reframe or opening up or giving vision a little bit broader way of, a distant way of thinking about something. Other thoughts?
I always think it's helpful to like try to, I mean, I have to remind myself of this all the time, is that like things are interwoven together and not necessarily separate. And so sometimes, especially like when maybe things don't go your way or something, you tend to like, or at least I tend to be like, oh my God, I did all this wrong. And, like beating myself up. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, there's all this other stuff that I accomplished. And like, there's no like end point. It's like an ongoing kind of, and I think I said this in another meeting recently, like this is kind of an ongoing process. So just thinking about how everything is entwined together as opposed to being bright line separate things.
Yeah, I always think curiosity is kind of the key to a growth mindset. And I've been reading the research on curiosity, which is fascinating, by the way. And so I was just like, sure, that was like the quickest way from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset is curiosity, asking a question, expanding. And then one of my friends said, humor. So the reason why we're spending a little bit of time on this fixed versus growth mindset is because while in the room together, you want to be curious and open and okay with mistakes and effort and all of that. But you also represent tens of thousands of people. Each of you walk in the room representing some section of the community. And so when you're out in the community, sometimes you can face people who are approaching things with a fixed mindset and just kind of identifying that and kind of like, is this a moment for humor? Is it a moment for vision? Is it a moment for curiosity, or is it a moment for interconnection? Might be mechanisms you can use to open up that conversation. So we don't really spend that much time on that, but I love this model. And ultimately, I think it sort of speaks to what the public library is in the community. It's the place to help people growth mindset. So the next section we're going to look at is the core values of librarianship. So there's 12 core values of librarianship. I want you to rank them for yourself from your top 1, 2, 3, all the way down to 11 and 12. You shouldn't think very much about this. You should just go in and quickly read through them and see which ones most resonate, and then organize them for yourself. Which is a need. I'm just going to give you 1 more minute.
Just the top 3.
No, you know, go all the way down. The least important. There has to be a 10. Are you doing? Is that done? So what we're gonna do is just have like small conversations with each other. And so Doug and Joni will be together, Benita and Carl will be together, and Sylvia and Sarah will be together. David, if you and Kim want to talk, you're welcome to, and Jennifer can join you too. And just take a few minutes to sort of say, what were you taught and why? And also look at the ones that you consider the least valuable. You know, just see, there's no right or wrong here, but just have a conversation about why these are your top few, and also why you sign Boulder is 11 and 12. You don't have to get too much conversation about the middle ones.
Here we are again. We used to do everything.
I know. I picked these pretty randomly.
I like that, yeah.
I was sort of in the same, in the space of intellectual freedom and democracy and public.
Which was new for me.
Right.
In that top space for me.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of these club together. So like I put
an access.
education and learning in one, just because that's like ultimately, you know, and that's kind of,
For my last one, I
that's
think
what I was thinking
professionalism.
was like, would be at the top, I guess. But then, yeah, in terms of like, and same with access was the top. But then, yeah, like intellectual freedom, diversity, like, those are all kind of in the middle together. Like some of them have more like umbrellas for others. But you know, so that's where I started to get like, I don't know.
No, they're all.
It's like picking one doesn't education. They're all behind.
Freedom.
Right, yeah, I have this.
Higher on my list, I think.
Your lower three.
I had
Right, I think that's.
sustainability, which kills me, because that's important to me, but I just didn't get to it. And then, professionalism, I think, was down. Yeah.
Professionalism was like 12 for me.
Yeah.
Just because they're all important, that kind of thing, but that
People.
and preservation, social responsibility, I don't know why.
And I think for the library.
I see the alignment, yeah, yeah.
I don't know, I thought some of these other things were like upper tier.
To me, like,
The reminder when you're starting.
if the library
Common.
is
Really don't.
fulfilling the core of like diversity and democracy, then you have social responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, so that's kind of where I was also.
Yeah.
And I felt like some of them, if you combine them, you know, then you get the other ones anyway. But yeah, I don't know, I
Yeah.
had like confidentiality, privacy towards the bottom.
That's next.
Just, I think again, I just sort of didn't feel like the other ones were, like the other ones were more important, not that it's not important.
And see, as they, I mean, that piece,
I mean.
intellectual freedom,
Oh.
aligned, so it would have been in my top.
I think,
I think it was in my top ones.
I think there's probably
Yeah.
140,000.
Because
Right.
the responsibility that we have for that, I mean, that
Because when we look at the.
letting people can access your library card checkouts, right?
There was
And
58%.
people, yeah. If we didn't have that and people didn't trust that in this library, then everything.
Yeah, that's true, I guess I wasn't thinking about it as much in that context.
Here, some of the.
Yeah, no, yeah, I would say, it's a lot of fun, yeah. Oh, I usually, I go almost every year. Yes.
Do you cosplay?
All right, so what were some of your top values? What was number one, number two?
Access, we both.
We both picked that.
You both had access
Oh.
first?
Although, you have it.
Placement bias, it was in the upper left corner.
Yeah, right. That's true. Good point. What about over here with
Yeah, I think we both valued the like democracy, intellectual freedom, public good kinds of things pretty highly. I was just saying that this exercise to me was a challenge because I felt like some of these, if you combine them, you get other ones. So like, it felt like, okay, well, if I combine these three in the top 5, then I don't have to worry about that one until, so, you know, it's a little strategic, but yeah, we felt like that was, you know, kind of big picture, high level, important for the library.
So what was it, public good, democracy,
Intellectual freedom.
and intellectual freedom?
But you could combine intellectual freedom and democracy, I think.
Right.
In the pursuit of oneness. Anyway.
Well, and access and, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's like I said, that's where it started to get.
Yeah. Good.
We both put in access, I think, pretty highly. That was a good one. And then she had diversity. I had diversity as 4th. And then I also had the public good, but she put that last because she ranked it with other things. So I think similar themes with the other groups.
Same here. Intellectual freedom and democracy. And ranked lifelong learning education for one, which I found that interesting because that was where we had the biggest disparity in scores. Mine wasn't in the top 6.
And so it's my top one as well. So the thing about these, the top ones are core values that resonate most for you. And when you have those core values, they're the ones you're willing to have the courage to defend when there's conflict, right? So while you see some commonalities, there's also probably some distinct differences among you on board. It's a good thing. Because you can each kind of be the keeper of a couple that you're willing to speak up for and defend because it really resonates for you. So I like to tell the story of when values conflict, because I believe every conflict is values conflict. So, and in fact, I did a trustee session about a month or so ago, and they were doing this exercise, and one trustee said, you know, I value this and this, and another trustee said, well, those are the same. And then the first trustee is like, well, I don't actually think of them as it's 2 distinct things. And the other one was like, oh, well, no, they could be the same. And so we can have our core values, but we can't tell other people how they discern and identify those core values. But the reason why we get into conflicts is because people are just placing different priority on their values. So the example is a work example. Some years ago, we were in the middle of hiring somebody, and I was working with a colleague who thinks really differently than me. And we were going over the questions we were going to ask for the interviews. And one of the questions it's a pretty standard question for me to ask my staff is, tell us about a time you broke a rule to provide excellent customer service. So right there is a key values conflict, right?
Yeah.
And we can tell by the kinds of answers, like, is this a person who values rules but also values service, and to what extent are they willing to go, and that sort of thing. And my colleague said to me, and we've always kind of had a tense relationship because we discern our values differently. I'm really into service, and she often says no. And I don't believe in no, because I work for libraries that find ways of saying yes. So when she said, can we get rid of this question? And it's actually the most telling question at the time that I would use in my interview. So naturally I was like, no, but instead what I said was, tell me what it is about this question that you don't like. And she said, it's superfluous because it's never appropriate to break a rule. And in that moment, I realized what her values priorities were. I completely shifted my relationship. And, you know, we kept the question because I said, that's a perfectly acceptable answer to this question. And if you answered it that way, you're telling me everything I need to know about what would hire you. It was a grants fiscal position. Probably a good answer for that particular thing, right? So anyway, that just illustrates that you can have tensions. And often what seems like a conflict is because at a deep level, you're constantly filtering our reality with our values priority. And when somebody else comes at us with a different values priority, it can feel like a conflict unless we understand that they too are motivated by something that matters. It's just not the same, it's not organized in the same way as us. Does this make sense? So, you know, if you are out at the grocery store and somebody comes up to you and said, library board, why are you, you know, why do you have so much pornography in it?
How do you know?
You in for the fix to a growth mindset? That's how you know. I mean, and this can happen, and it's sort of like, well, what values are they driven by, to ask the question? That's not apparent. Say more about your concern. Because whenever somebody complains, it's because something matters to them. It's because they care. Right? If they didn't care, they wouldn't complain. Just ignore the service. So anyway, I just think it's helpful to both know these values and know on the library board when to pull out which value. It's good to have them at the ready because you'll be having conversations and one of your colleagues will be very insistent about one thing and you can kind of step back and say, where are they at here? What values are they really bringing to this conversation? And what can I bring to make it wonder? Any other thoughts about that?
I think this would be an interesting and helpful board to have posted with our meetings. Just have these values up there for us and for the time when we do get public here. Because at least in my conversations with people, I don't know that a lot of people really know that this exists, that libraries have this shared set of values. So.
Also, on the next page is the Library Bill of Rights, which is sort of what I think is like how these values manifest in terms of how libraries function. Some library boards adopt the Library Bill of Rights as part of their structure in making decisions more formally, but it's not necessary. I think it's just important to be familiar with these and to be familiar with some of the other resources that are available here around professional ethics and equity, diversity, and inclusion. So some of these other resources that I've included here really help to unpack what like intellectual freedom looks like, and the freedom to read statement is like, or you know, if you're thinking about confidentiality and privacy, learning more about that. So I tried to pull together some resources so you can unpack some of these values and what they look like in the library setting, and I'm also thinking about them when you're in your board meetings. I'm not going to go through this very much, but if you want to glance through it, if anything strikes you as interesting or concerning, we talk about it.
I'm interested in the adoption date.
You will adopt it. I mean, so the commission adopts it in the context of the policy on challenging materials. So you adopt this, the library bill of rights and the AOAs, that the commission is currently controlling the policy, so that probably won't happen for you till December or so, but this is always one of those ones where it's, it's easy to say in a room, like, yeah, I believe in all this stuff. It becomes a lot more complicated when you're faced with real situations, right? So real situations which are, I think what we read about mostly in the media now are organized challenges, which don't necessarily they're organized groups that are challenging materials, but that is not always what you're seeing. A lot of times you're seeing a parent or a person who has a strong belief or commitment, and they don't really want to go censorship route either, but they're concerned, right? And so that is the kind of things which we are up until the various points of the culture wars, which happen every few decades. That is the context where this policy is being considered. The same is true for privacy, which was one of those things which you'll also confront. Like there's a crime committed in the library. Police are often shocked that we won't just willy-nilly share tape with them unless a judge rules that we have to. So, there are things that we maintain that seem sometimes they conflict with.
Good evening. The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
It may conflict with your values or your better judgment at times. And if that's what
Buenas noches. La biblioteca se cerrará en 15 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
Yeah, I was noticing that it hadn't been amended for 40 years, and I was trying to guess what was the 2019 amendment, probably the data privacy stuff, or do you know what the 2019 amendment was?
Yeah, so the original was put out in 1939, and there was a lot of churn in our society about kind of shutting down different political views, communism, fascism, etc. At the same time, these additional adoption dates are kind of interesting to see over time. And you can go and see all of them to see the difference. But I think that the January 2019 one, and this was fairly controversial, the adoption of the exhibit space and meeting room space statements about neutrality that happened there. And there's still some controversy about who can use the meeting rooms. And you have a meeting policy, good for you too. Thanks for asking about that. So I included the part of library law that includes the powers and duties of the Board of Trustees. And there's a language, 2 pages. This is not 2490-108 is about establishing a board, and that's what you're doing now. And then 2490-19 is also about kind of like how you function as a board, that process of selection of trustees and that sort of thing, even though there are local intergovernmental agreements that clarify some of the points here. This is just nice to have the law already. Lawyers, right? So.
Most of us are lawyers.
And so I've done what you should never do, which is summarize the powers and duties of the board, adding a few other things to it, so that you know some of the key things, but these aren't the only things. I think what's important, though, is to, on a regular basis, kind of think about what are the strengths of, what are we doing well? What might be areas of growth for the board, which might be an annual review process. And I have these fabulous pocket governments, if you want, that just kind of like get down to the basics.
You have what?
These little pocket guides, which.
I thought you said pocket knife, that's what I was like.
Everyone has pocket knives.
Exactly, yeah, right.
Somebody
On each blade, there's a.
confronts you in the grocery store again. That is you.
spent months out in front of grocery stores, talking to people. Maybe a year, you know, every other weekend or so.
Sharon, what do you mean by cause management of library property?
That's just taken from the law, so you just have to explain here.
Cause management of library property, the second number 2, cause
Does that
management.
like affect the management of the property essentially?
I think it's probably referring to your.
Make sure the management of library property occurs.
What an odd.
David.
It might be an odd phrase for it. It would be maybe better, but it might actually be in here. So,
It's like you can establish meeting rooms, Johnny, the old charter.
Yes,
Commission can establish meeting
can
rooms.
establish meeting rooms.
oh, was that part of the charter originally? That's nice.
Up until
Up until 2016.
And so, on top of that, it's got the next 3 pages, we are down to.
The library will be closing in 10 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
So the
La biblioteca se cerrará en 10 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
So, at this who does what section, and sometimes this comes up because, I don't think this is happening with you all. It's likely to happen, but in some cases where library trustees kind of get a little bit too interested in the operations of the library, like I'll say, why did you join the library? And they say, well, because I want to do programming. It's like, that's not what a trustee does. Trustee does bigger picture. Trustee thinks 5 or 10 years out. And so this sort of distinguishes sort of like what did the board of trustees do versus what the library director does, and then what do they do together? So let you glance through that, see if you have any questions about that, but if it's circular, and you've done all the definitions, so we know that.
We're a little different, I think, because we're starting this from scratch, so we have a little bit more, not with the programming books and stuff, but like
Getting into nitty
a
gritty.
little bit more nitty gritty. It's a little different, but hopefully we'll work through the other stuff. By December, as David said.
Yeah, and I think long-term, like, I know all these responsibility systems fairly well. And I've seen people try to utilize them in different ways. And so one of the things here, quite often, like, if you ever catch me saying, like, that's operations, then you don't worry about it. But you have every right to expect that we show you operational efficiency at any time you want, right? So if you want to know how things are going, right, you have every reason to expect that we prove to you that we are operationally efficient. We don't want you can suggest a program on swapping puzzles. I don't make those decisions either. So it's like, you can suggest anything you want, but it's probably, that may happen or may not. That's not going to be very effective. But if you want to know how a program is doing and what it costs and how the public receives it, that is certainly your responsibility too. So to understand that we are being operationally efficient, because that comes back to your fiduciary responsibility. Are we spending the taxpayers' money wisely? And that's a question that you always have to answer. To that extent, you need to be able to say, like, well, we actually did this. This is what was shown. It's how you use that money.
Yeah, I think probably in future years, maybe not immediately, it would be, having kind of briefings on the operations during our, staff meeting, our board meetings might be something we think about. I think short, brief presentations
Yeah, you're gonna do your data reports however frequently you choose to
Yeah.
get them, whether it's quarterly, I think the commission does it. You can do it whatever frequency you want.
The annual report is just finances, but when I looked at like Poudre Valley, they have a nice, like, one page or like engagement thing, and it's really nice.
Yeah, and so I think, to your point, it's a dialogue, right? And then there's some things like, so you go out, and you're part of another committee with a different organization, and you hear some things in their board meeting, and you think, wow, this would be it'd be great to have some kind of a relationship between this organization and the library. And what do you do about that? What you don't do is like commit right there to the partnership, because you don't act on your own, you're not just part of the board. Bring back and say, I think we have a strategic possibility here, talk about it as a board, we'll bring it back to David. But, as you leave the board meeting and go out, you represent the library, you don't represent the board meeting.
The library will be closing in 5 minutes. Please complete your library business and exit the building. Thank you.
So there's just
La biblioteca se cerrará en 5 minutos. Por favor, concluya sus actividades en la biblioteca y salga del edificio. Gracias.
When you attend by Zoom, it's fun looking at everyone's faces when those.
What do you see?
Give us the look.
I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm just saying, it's pretty hilarious. Sorry, because everyone's just sitting there like. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. And so to your point with your strategic plan, you're just about ready to get your, kind of modify your plan, and then on an annual basis or maybe more frequently, you get updates on key initiatives or your key goals and sort of where are we at, tracking that over time. So it's not really necessarily telling David how to run things, but it's just keeping track of how the progress is going with these things. Does that make sense? Is there a distinction there?
So can we talk a little bit about the relationship with the electeds who appoint us? Because this is a new world for them, coming from a library commission when they got to oversee it. And I think we're going to have some who are interested in probably having more say in what we do than is really their role. Just kind of talk about experiences with that and sort of polite ways to handle that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is relationship building so that there's a sense of trust. So what you might do is have more frequent updates to some of the governing leaders, not to the point where it's killing, but even just having some kind of presence in some of the meetings, but also maybe David or someone prepares a report about like sort of, even kind of giving them this. We've got to handle it. This is what the board is working on. So it's just kind of communicating what you're doing and that you're doing it in a way that they realize you've got it handled and they don't have to step in. Does that help?
Yeah, my cynical experience is if you give them something like that, they're immediately going to come and say, well, we'd like to change this.
Right, yeah, well, so probably then, if it's like that dynamic, I wouldn't go into too much detail. But, just the bottom line is, we've got a system, structure, we've got to handle. I'll get you the report at the end of the year.
I think from the legal perspective, Kim, I mean, they've appointed us. I guess they could move to remove us as two bodies. No, we have to remove ourselves, right?
Cause.
Yeah, for cause. So our first and foremost responsibility is to the district and, to the fiduciary responsibility to, the district.
You really have no responsibility. You're going to say that bluntly, but we've litigated this twice now.
Yeah,
And their job, it's a ministerial act.
right.
Or doing.
So they understood that. I heard at least one of them repeat those words. So,
One of them doesn't.
no, I get it.
That's-
Yeah,
Well,
I get it.
I think it is a really important distinction because you report to the taxpayers.
Right.
They're the ones that are gonna wanna know. And the more transparent you are, what's happening, with the community, the less likely it is for the county commissioners or the town folks to come after you because you know the public is feeling good about what's going on in the library. And what you're doing. I know that takes a while to build, but you had a considerable amount of support through this past. So continuing to have those relationships with the community in a fairly regular way can help to get community leaders talking backs to, I don't know.
And I mean, it's also something not to be taken lightly. There are concerted efforts in Colorado.
Attention,
As
the
well as
library is now closed. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again.
A board of trustees of a library to do exactly what it is they want. So that happens.
Atención,
It doesn't
la
happen.
biblioteca está cerrada. Gracias por acompañarnos hoy y esperamos verlos nuevamente.
And it's also, it has been in the past a stated objective of at least one of the major political parties in the United States is that, you need to start stacking school boards and library boards and all these other things. So that is not, it is politics. That part of it is ministerial, but it is political as well. So it's like being mindful of that is just, I think, important. Not that it changes what you do, but being mindful of that possibility.
Did that help your question, Johnny, at all, or?
Yeah,
A
I
little
just
bit.
thought it was useful to surface it.
If you need support, I know you're interfacing with these folks a lot.
Well,
You're always welcome to
Yeah,
bring one of us in. or-
yeah, no, it's not that. I just thought it was useful to have a discussion of all of this, because.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Benita and I have been discussing this with David, and I think honestly, once we get through the IGA, a lot of this will go away.
Right.
So, it's just this birthing process, if you will.
The things we've seen happen quite often is if you give them a lot of information, you get tired of it. You get to do.
Then I guess the other thing that I would say is, talk to, have your talking points consistent among the trustees. Whatever it is you're talking to county commissioners about, or the public about, do it in a consistent way. Maybe other
Yeah.
communications.
Triple emphasize, agree with that. And I love how you started, just build relationships and trust.
Do you have a story behind that?
Not really, no. I mean, I was on the school board, so a lot of what I say is informed by that,
Yeah.
but, I don't have any specific story I would volunteer in this.
So,
Yeah.
like, so much emphasis on it. And so, just to kind of move along here, so there's the powers and duties of the board as a group, and then we also have a bit of a self-assessment for a library trustee. Again, this is something that you might want to look at. It's this little sheet with the 4 quadrants that you could kind of like look at and reflect on for yourself, and then put in your score or whatever. I see I have mine there. Just glancing over this, are there any of these boxes where you're like, what the heck?
Well, there's a bunch of them not doing, so that's what jumps out at me, like,
Yeah.
to-do list.
it is a bit of a to-do list, right? And it's, like I said, it's not necessarily a to-do list for the next couple of months, but as you look at rounding the corner into 2024, maybe come back and do this stuff after you get through the gauntlet.
Do we attend the conferences or organize, is there something for trustees or is there?
Yeah, Cal has done trustee track in the past, the national conferences always have some things as well, so.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what you're interested in, we'll certainly be putting them in front of you.
Yeah.
You know, we plan on doing a fairly hefty recruiting effort at PLA this coming year. And so it might be good for you all to be there as well.
Recruiting for,
Positions.
So the Colorado Association of Libraries Conference is in October this year, and on October 13th, which happens to be Friday, is going to be a lucky day because we are going to have a trustee track that day. Sarah Renner will be presenting one of the sessions to update you on legislation. We'll have a policy development panel, different library directors talking, and then an advocacy toolkit and trends talk. There's other things going on that day. So if it would be a one day, but then they also have like a half day on Saturday. So if you wanted to do something like that, it's going to be in Loveland, and probably the district has funding.
You know, we would send you, we've done it for the commission, commissioners have gone in the past to conferences.
And Jennifer sent us an email last week
Yeah.
asking us if we were interested. And from my experience, I would really recommend that people go if you can. I went several times on commission and I learned a lot, not just from the trustee track. I remember going to the first time with the trustee track and going, oh, I'm so glad I'm not a trustee. But I mean, for me, it was helpful just in understanding more how librarians think and seeing all the different ways that libraries interact with very different communities. It really expanded my scope. You talk about that growth collaboration thing. I found it really helpful.
and I attended 2 years ago when I first became a library commissioner and didn't have that same experience. And it might have been because it was hybrid or right post hybrid.
Yeah.
It wasn't very substantive and seemed very cliquish, right? You know, like it was just like meant for a small group, like it wasn't meant for me. Like I couldn't find my place there and I couldn't find other commissioners there, mostly library staff members.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember we did some good networking, both with library people and with trustees. So anyway, I'm sure it varies year to year. But
Yeah.
Yes, the full program will come out in the next week or two. And then to David's point, the Public Library Association conference is going to be in Columbus, Ohio, in I think late March, early April or something like that. And we all want to live in Ohio.
Especially in late March.
Columbus is a nice town.
I've heard that.
It is.
Yeah, and then the American Library Association has a section for trustees and friends and foundations. And so that's UNAM for libraries, and they have online resources as well as programs and conferences and whatnot. So what's nice about that, some of those dedicated things is that you do get to meet other trustees from the boards. So you do understand your uniqueness and meet somebody from a different board.
Emily Drabensky, I think she's the president of the American Library Association, I think, maybe. She helped us fundraise for the campaign.
Nice.
Yeah.
Several things on the list too around advocacy, which is not something that the Library Commission has ever really done on the legislative level, because the city has its own coordinated efforts. And so even ideas that came from the commission wouldn't necessarily get picked up by the city's legislatures. But Cal, again, the Colorado Association of Libraries has its own lobbyists. Oftentimes libraries find that we are together in interest. We kind of, since we share so much together across the state and through consortiums like Marmot and stuff like that, we oftentimes find ourselves advocating for each other. That may mean in some cases we're representing through our legislators in Boulder, the interest, what may seem, at least initially, to be in the interest solely of rural libraries. But we see it as being interesting in all libraries throughout the state. So that's something that we'll get to. We're not there yet, but there'll be a whole program where I'm sure we're going to be coming forward with something like, hey, would you mind calling Steve Denver, telling him like this idea? So, and we got a lot of legislators involved. So it could be important. State legislation.
Yeah, so there are, so in the, just some history about legislation, recent legislation that's impacted libraries. It doesn't have to always be libraries, but a couple of years ago, a bunch of legislators got together and decided that everybody who was involved in public libraries needed to take a 40-hour training on the science of reading. Everybody involved in the library included our volunteers, including the trustees. So imagine as part of your role as a trustee taking a 40-hour online course on the science of reading. Because that was what the law told you. So the Cal lobbyists were able to get the law changed a little bit through that process. And there is still something in library law about knowing more about the science of reading, but it's not a have to. It's like a good idea, and it's for the state library to do training, mainly with youth services people. So we were able to take something that was sort of a seemed kind of arduous for most libraries and modify it to be something palatable and in the spirit of what the science of reading is all about. So that's an example of one. Another is in the last legislative session, we asked for an extra $100,000 for the courier. This reduces the price of moving materials around Colorado. And because so many trustees actually, particularly in the Western Slope, reached out to their legislators, we had Republicans on the floor going, we need to give the libraries more money. And it's because trustees picked up the phone and talked to the legislators. In the upcoming session, there may be another financial ask for more state funding for your collections in your library. But really there's something brewing where, I don't know if you've seen what happened in Illinois where the state passed a law that libraries couldn't censor information. And if they did, they wouldn't receive state money. And so that is a consideration the committee is looking at bringing to the legislature in the next session. So there's a variety of different opportunities sometimes to speak up and call a legislator, either at the state level or at the federal level. And of course, there is federal money that comes down to libraries. So not to belabor it too much, but if you are a policy wonk and you want to be part of the legislative committee, there are trustees that go to Washington or go to the lobby day down at the Capitol in Denver and are more engaged on a monthly basis with those meetings to find out from the Cal lobbyists what's going on throughout the legislative session, which is usually kind of the January to May timeframe is when things are being done. So
David, I have a question. Are there going to be library journals available for trustees to read? I don't remember those. I mean, I'm on the United for Library email list, so I get their stuff and read their stuff, but never ever
I mean, that's something we could, you need to probably bring Laura back to tell you what kind of stuff.
get a subscription to them and happy to share them.
Did one of you had requested a book, or we purchased the book, so you'll be getting a book.
They have trustee
handbook.
Soon, the trustee handbook, but then if there are any journals that you subscribe to, you'd like to see, I mean, we do circulate. Most of them are online now, but we have virtual subscriptions that you can go on and read various library literature.
Yes.
So we can mailbox it out. Stairs in the admin office.
Yeah, and we can put together a list too, of just some, because we get a lot of stuff.
And again, not right now, but it's something I never thought about. I just saw that here. I
Yeah.
thought, oh, that'd be interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes what that looks like is just, Jennifer or David see something that they think is of interest, or they just forward the blog post or the article. And probably if they're sending it to you, it is worth a read, either a scan, just to kind of see, is this indicating some kind of trend or something that has a governance aspect to it.
Yeah, so, yeah, we will definitely, I mean, so a lot of the stuff now is, the media is covering libraries and the culture wars and censorship in a manner, I think probably way better than what library journals are. A lot of the library journals, there's good information from time to time. A lot of it's like here's all the good stuff we plan on doing, and I'm not a big fan of that kind of writing. I would see the results after you did it. But certainly there's a lot of pertinent discussions that are going on now, and as we find them, we'll forward them on. I think the commission recently forwarded an article around, which I totally disagreed with. I found it interesting in the sense in which it started with the point that librarians don't have values, which is what we talk about a little bit. There's not a philosophy of librarianship. It's like, you must be out of your mind. There is definitely a philosophy of librarianship, but that was the premise by which the article started, and then articulated some that seemed to be very based in a time that was written in the 60s, but hearkening for like 30s or something like that. That's what they really desired, for that equanimity and neutrality, which we are in some cases neutral, and that's not necessarily a happy place for you. I'm sure you're for like Seattle Public Library was recently kicked out of the LGBTQ parade because they allowed public access to meeting rooms for groups that were anti-LGBTQ. That's being covered currently in the Boulder Reporting Lab or at the Boulder Weekly about the schools allowing groups to use, religious groups to use their meeting rooms. We allow anyone to use our meeting rooms. Like, you would have to change the policy if you were to change that, and I would caution you not to do it. Like, our meeting rooms are free and open to the public. Anyone can use them. And so there are repercussions to that. Some groups say, like, you can't be in our parade, and that's unfortunate. But there are sometimes consequences of being free and open to it.
So do we, as a body, need to join CalCon?
No, we'll sign you up. We'll sign you up for membership.
And so
As a commission, I know how we do it. I don't know how we do it right now.
Okay.
If you're interested in going, just send.
No, I just wanted, just as an association, or do we as a body join these various organizations, or is it under,
We do
like the
individual
city?
memberships. That's something we
Okay.
have to think of in the future, whether we want to do institutional membership. They've been cut out of our range prior.
Yeah.
We'll have to consider those going forward, because there are institutional memberships.
And so that gathering is the only time, like, trustees of the state, that's the forum that they go to, right? Like, there isn't any other, like, trustee group meeting.
They used to have a meeting, Robert Carr, athletic group. I don't think that happens anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what it does, because there's it's kind of trustee like them. Is there a trustee interest group? Well, that's what we're, so there might be a dorm trustee.
There you go.
There's lots of time.
Yeah.
There is a space, I think, on the trustee website to like join an email list.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I did that or not. I haven't seen any emails from it. Is that active or?
It's currently not very
Okay.
active. It's because I'm supposed to be running it.
Okay.
I started my job in August, and I've been traveling around the street pretty significantly, so I haven't really been doing
Okay,
it.
I just wasn't sure.
And I think that there will be more trustee things kind of coming up in the next year. I don't know if we'll do regionals, but you could look at that if that's of interest.
Since you're here, I will note one thing with the Colorado library law that could use revision is the bonding, the bonding requirement for the district election, like what the hell that means, might be, and it's also very difficult, I think, if for volunteer organizations to try to post a bond of any significant value. Anyway, just something to think about when you're
Yeah.
talking to your legislative, not that we'll have to do that again, but, for others,
And nobody knew how to post it, even if.
or where to get it. So
An adventure.
Yeah, okay.
we're just praying that they would agree.
That's good feedback. Okay, so just in the interest of time, we're gonna go through this next section pretty quickly. I created a game out of law, which is second, I know so many lawyers. And so LGAT, the intention behind this is just to raise awareness of some of the different legal things that we stumble upon in governance and running libraries. And so I think if you want to go through and sort of do the true false game, I have the answers on the next page, so don't cheat. You can kind of go through this real quickly. I love that you're playing the game. That's great. All right, so let's go through these really quickly. Doesn't matter whether you got them right or not. But the Public Library Board of Trustees has their own section of law. We do. Got it right here. True. By law, each public library board must submit an annual report for their local governing authority and submit their annual statistics to the Colorado State Library. True. You need your stats. What's good about those statistics is that you can compare them across time, you can compare them to other libraries and do some benchmarking and other things. So we keep a pretty deep data database for different kinds of reports and things like that. So it's kind of fun to geek out on if you like to geek out on it. David, I know does. Conversation between two library trustees is considered a public meeting, must be noticed. False. Correct. Board members' emails and text messages related to library governance are subject to the Open Records Act. True. Yeah. And so this how you manage those emails and text messages over time, your retention policy and whatnot is something to consider. Let's see, Colorado has no provision for library user privacy. You actually have one of the strongest user privacy laws in the country because of, who's the guy that shot Reagan? Hinckley. So that law came out of John Hinckley. After he shot Reagan, the FBI showed up at the Jefferson County Public Library and asked to see everything he'd been checking out. Okay, so a library is a local government entity with legal requirements outlined by federal, state, and local law. That's true. ADA compliance, records retention, Internet Protection Act, both at the state and federal level, budget requirements. So there's a lot of different things there that under things that you need to be aware of. Of course, your director keeps track of all of this. I'll tell you what's what. Public library cannot be held legally responsible if a child is assaulted in the library. It's false. Senate Bill 21088, the 2021 Child Sexual Assault Accountability Act was passed. And that's definitely something that your organization has probably already done, staff training and consistent mechanisms in order to ensure due diligence around this. This law has not been tested yet, so we don't have due diligence on this. That's something to be aware of. Library fine, this isn't even the law, this is just, I throw this one in because it's a passion project of mine. You all don't charge fines for both fines and fees for late damaged and lost books, children's books are a barrier to the most vulnerable populations using the library. So while most libraries now don't charge late fees, the trend now is for libraries to also start looking at not charging for damaged or lost children's word books, picture books, that sort of thing. So, good luck. So the district board can hire a director without public notice, you know that one is.
Found that one out, just
Some people have found that out the hard way, so I put that one. And a public entity can dissolve and close the public library without the vote of the community. This is false. So, little few sentences in the library law that protect a local community's library from being closed down by their municipality or entity. This doesn't mean that in a district of yours, you could close a branch. If you had a branch in Iowa, you decided to close it, you could. It's only otherwise.
We excluded Niwot from our district.
Oh.
After-
Should we close that line?
Closed.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's just a way to kind of point out some other legal things that you might be aware of. And we have other resources here that I've included for you so that you can, on your electronic document, you can kind of look around. If there's something you have a question about, advocacy tools, for example, you could go in and check out these resources on the legislative committee at the state and federal level. Look at other information there. So that's kind of the quick and dirty. Any questions about this?
I just want to say thank you for the online content. It is so helpful. We are cannibalizing. It is really great just to have such a broad range of resources there. So thank you. I'm sure it takes a lot to keep that up.
Yeah, so I guess overall, you know, it's a healthy board is a board that faces a growth mindset and curiosity and expanded ways of thinking. Also faces conflict with the community in that same kind of curious and humorous way, even though sometimes that's hard to do, recognizing the people who are voicing their opinion or doing so because they care. And knowing that there's a lot of infrastructure to support you as you build infrastructure and move forward as a board. And what you do is such an important thing to your community. You realize every day people are coming into this library and doing things that are really making a difference in their lives. And the difference between a strong library and a library that's weak is how solid the leadership of the organization is. So, best wishes with your new leadership as you move forward. And know that we're here for you.
And we'll have the opportunity to go over a lot more of this stuff in detail as we look into policies, but it's not really on your schedule right now. So some of the stuff will be coming back to you in drips and drabs through policies and, plans that you're gonna adopt in the course of the next 6 months. Getting to there, but we can always have Sharon back. She has a shopping list of training topics that she can do, and we chose only a few of them today, but I thought that's probably the most important. We have kind of in our back pocket a full orientation package for trustees. You guys don't have time for that right now. But we're getting sort of some of it now in doing the actual work. So, but there will be opportunities. If you ever feel like, oh my gosh, questions back to some of this stuff, don't hesitate to bring it back up because we used to do a full meeting on intellectual freedom. That was a meeting in and of itself. The lines are more clear and it's, there's so much politics going on around it now. It gets a little dicier when it's, just people and not whole organizations that are trying to boycott lists and vote on those people and they have one book in mind. So it is a very complicated. So whatever questions you might have. Thank you, Sharon.
It's so nice to see some of you again and to meet others of you and best wishes.
Yeah, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sharon. Appreciate it.
See you in October. We'll see you in October, maybe.
Take care.
All right.
All these lawyers.
His board, he was board.
Yeah,
that's great.
So it's. So, just not, I thought the meeting went really well last week, and I just wanted to express my thanks and thanks that I've received multiple staff members who are so appreciative of you guys coming and to watched it on tape after the fact, and I just think it was a great first step. The survey went out on Friday morning. We're getting good response rates now. I'm discover about me whenever we do these kind of engagement things. I get very good. I want the highest response rate we've ever had in the survey on this one, which would be remarkable, but because I think we've had surveys where we've gotten in the 80s. And we sometimes make them mandatory, so we have 100%. But I think so far so good, and trends will emerge in these next 2 weeks that then we'll have plenty of good stuff to talk about. It is interesting in which the case has brought up other conversations. So on the whatever you call it, the Slack channel, the Teams channel on Sunday, it was a fairly robust discussion. Now that we're looking at all this stuff that the city provides, can we start talking about all the stuff that we would consider that we might want, unrelated to what the city provides? And that was a fascinating discussion as well. So the ball is rolling. That's good. Staff will have more and more questions as we go, and it's really excellent.
On that, sorry. It might, you probably have this, what all of the other districts, at least in the Front Range, provide as benefits. That might be nice to look at and compare, or even provide to the staff as
We will, and I
Okay.
certainly will share whatever you guys want or what the personnel committee wants. We've looked at, we have some in terms of share drive, that we've shared in the leadership team. I don't know how many of them I've read at this point, a lot, and then organizations outside of libraries as well. So we're looking at a lot of different stuff. It's different. The Boulder is the only unionized library in the state. So there are some protections that came up with questions that are unlike what you would see in almost any other contract or employment deal across the state. The state mandates certain things around a lot of things. Most libraries are just barely within compliance, they're exactly what's required of them in the state, so that is their policy. None of the districts that we looked at have para. The ones that were in para have extricated themselves from it over the last 10 or 12 years. That's a huge concern of the staff. It's been coming up over and over and over again since before the election, I think. But
yeah.
so there are some things that we'll have to consider, and we'll have to look at how we create a package that's beneficial to everyone, but also provides that kind of parts of it that are manageable from a financial point of view, and then also ones that attract talent, right? So
Yeah.
it is increasingly the case that getting the best people requires that you have a good employment and benefits package. And so-
Right. And it's just good for us to have the information.
Yeah.
I think, so, and even staff, I mean, if they, to compare, what we're getting versus everybody else.
Yeah, oh, they have. I mean, I'm sure they looked at it, and
Yeah.
there are other examples. The university is the other one in the Boulder area that you can also look at their package. That's
Yeah.
not one that we put on our share drive for staff to look at. I've read it. It's, interesting.
Okay.
It's a lot of information. It's gonna be fascinating. It'll give the consultants with Mountain States a leg up to have that survey coming in. And it's kind of, I think it's probably, when we see the results, you'll find that it's fairly predictable. I mean, healthcare is pretty important across the board. Whether, I don't know what the cutoff year is, but, various levels of benefits like para and, the unlimited accrual of sick leave are of a higher value to get here for a long period of time, right? So that's, again, pretty obvious. We'll only be able to see how it breaks out demographically when we look at all of those. So I have two things for you tonight. I'm happy to talk about anything. Two service agreements that we're hoping to enter into, one of them in the form of a contract because it exceeds the $30,000 limit. I'll go over the first one, which is the financial service agreement. We began early on, I think a couple of weeks ago, looking for financial consultant to help us build out the models, the modeling software that we use for predicting, so that we could plug a dollar figure amount in if we make certain decisions that would then turn the model and we can look at it over a 15-year course. So it's basically doing an update for cash flows is what it really is, but cash flows going out for an extended period of time. So we could do expense forecasts, revenue forecasts. And then in addition to that, we asked them for the ways of which best to publicly present, since we're all in this first time, publicly present initially to the board that budget, so that you would have access to it and would be able to look at the thing in some form of dashboard or another. So they will be going through some samples that I hope we will be looking at in the course of the next couple of months around not only how you might like to see it, but how best you might like to see it displayed for the public. So that's what that initial consultant is for. The scope of work is comprehensive. They will also help us with investigating what form of accounting and financial system we would want to use, like QuickBooks or whatever, for the library system beginning in to build it this year. So they'll do some of that analysis and comparative data work for us as well. Their cost is estimated between $8,000 and $14,000. They're asking for $6,000 retainer. We'll enter into that agreement. The name of the company is, do you remember?
Are we talking about facilities?
No, the financial, just focused energy. They're what do you call it? Fractional CFO financial company. So they do this kind of work for all different companies in the Boulder area. The principal is in Boulder. They have offices in Denver. And then the second one that we have, which is going to require you guys to discuss below, is around the facilities analysis. So we knew this one was going to be more complicated. We listed 4 bids. We heard back from 3, 1 declining to submit a bid at this time, 2 bidding on the project, and a 4th who we never heard back from. Meaning I think we didn't have the time to take it up. There were a couple more on my list to call, but they had been recommended by that first one who said I can't do it, but here's 2 other of my competitors who you might call, and I did never call them. But among the companies that we called, Cumming is the recommended firm that I'm recommending for use. They are the only one that exceeded the limit in spend, but they were also put together the most comprehensive in this case, availability and responsiveness are key kind of components of our interviews with all of these consultants, because we need them to start tomorrow and deliver. And so coming, like Focused Energy, was quick to respond. I think they set up at least 3 meetings with me in the course of a week to meet with not just the principal of the company and the sales team, but rather I got to meet with the project manager and the engineer who would actually be doing the work. They wanted to go over more in depth what the scope is. So I believe Kim sent you the contract and the scope of work that they proposed. It is by far, by like 2.5 pages, most comprehensive in scope. I think it provides us with the kind of detail and level of understanding that you want to have about the buildings as you enter into the IGA negotiations. And they're ready to start tomorrow. They understand that your timeline is, they will have a report, a final report for us, is what they're saying is in July. So I know they put the timeline on here up to September, but that's to reflect the due time that we told them the negotiations for the IGA might go that long, so that you could keep calling them back through the course of, they anticipate having a full report of the condition of the buildings, assess the condition of the buildings and the cost by July. And the 2 things we requested, one is like, so the condition of the buildings, are the facilities in need of $1 million of work right now, 5 million, 8 million, whatever. They're going to put it rather in a time frame, so what needs to be done in the immediate time frame, in a 2 to 4 year time frame, and what can be done after 5 years. They'll look at it both in terms of a replacement value, meaning you take an old gas boiler and you replace it with another gas boiler, or replacing, not replacing, but actually bringing the building slowly up to code by each time. So they'll present. I'm imagining a somewhat complex pricing structure for how you'll have to be able to evaluate the buildings. It won't be a simple dollar figure, like you've got $8 million. It's what it is you want.
That's great. I'm glad you got that together. It sounds terrific.
So the cost is based on this project, this scope of work.
Yeah.
And then if we did anything with them beyond that, we would have to come up with a new cost structure, it looks like.
Yeah, we plan on doing a full facility study in 2024 is in your plan.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be not something, I mean, they would have an eligibility to bid on such a plan, but so for the companies, we would have to do an RFP for that one.
Yeah, no, just the contract structure, it talks about having like a year term, and I just wasn't sure what happens after like this project is done in July.
Yeah, I don't call it for anything, and I certainly don't have the contract for the full facilities analysis unless we just absolutely I think that's stupendous.
Yeah.
Great for them that they got this thing, because then they're gonna have a advantage that we know them.
Yeah, I saw that. I just wondered.
I think they meant that.
I think we're probably gonna get, I mean, if they can fulfill this scope, it's gonna go a long way into the next facilities master plan or facility study that you're,
Yeah.
I mean, at least a pretty decent outline of that. And hopefully it, just gives us, I don't know if it'll move the needle any on the negotiations, but at least gives us an idea of what we're signing up for, depending on the options we take with the city. So I think it's a good idea. I think we don't really have another better way to assess the facilities. That's the other, we don't have a facility manager. The city doesn't seem to have a ton of information around it. And so I think this at least gives us some information about what's gonna happen.
Yeah, and to be clear, so I have shared this with the city's facility. So he's aware of it. And to respond to spring ball next week.
Right.
In that scoping phase to work with them to provide him the information that we have. I mean, most of the information that was on your list, we have already provided. So I think there are 8 or 10 items on the list we've provided all but 2. One of those is, it's the annual average operating cost. That is something that facilities can pull from units. It's not And they can pull that data from Munis, and that's what do we want to see in it. And the other one is utility bills, which it sounds like it should be really easy. We do have a monitor for every building. It's been challenging. We've got rough estimates of the cost per year, but what the consultants want to see is their month-to-month utility bills to see how the energy consumption runs. And so,
That is difficult.
we're going to do our best. I mean, that's the one that I came up today with working with the facilities maintenance department again, saying like, is this something we can get? And they feel certain that they can get it, but they just don't know where, and they haven't seen it recently. I've never seen it, the monthly utility bill. So I've seen all the other stuff that was on the list, and most of the stuff that the Cumming group is requesting, we have seen it one time or another, and the city facilities department can supply like a record of roof maintenance. Like they keep that, right? Apparently every building has got some record of roof maintenance. So they'll have that, they have all that data, they have their certifications they have to pass. So those things are all monitored by the state or some regulatory agencies that they have to report them. So they have all that data and they'll be able to provide it to the consultant.
Well, we ready for motion?
I'll read it if you, unless you. I move the Board of Trustees approve the professional services agreement with Cumming Management Group, Inc. to evaluate the condition of the library building dated June 16th, 2023 for a fixed fee of $36,145.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See if we can't get started on them this week.
That's great. And can you, just to close the loop, can you speak to the request we got on the public channel, the apricot tree thing, just so people know that?
Yeah, it's a great story. I would love to share that story. So yeah, we've got.
Yeah, go for it.
So,
Go for it.
a library staffer passed away. Coordinated with some library staff, services staff, and people like that who wanted to put a memorial at Cumming. So they planted an apricot tree that had been seeded from 100-year-old downtown area. The tree died about 4 years ago, and we eventually removed it and ground the stump. And when talking about what we would put in its place, there was a project that's been going on at CU for a long time, and the Carnegie is an archive for around the history of the apple trees in the Boulder area. And so we began work on a project which has now got county-wide. There are multiple organizations involved, the big dog being CU. And we hired a professional, what is he? He's an arborist who had begun a program where he's grafting historical trees that are maybe down to the last tree onto new apple trees that are of a generic form, and then grafting sometimes as many as 20 different apples on the same tree, which then over the course of time it blooms in slightly 20 different ways and it produces 20 different apples. Fascinating project. We contracted with him. The tree was planted 2 or 3 years ago. He completed the grafting this year, I guess. He completed the grafting of it, and it showed up on a tour of, I don't even remember what, some nature tour around Boulder County a week or so ago, and that's when you got your email. Well, she's been talking about this, the person has been talking about this for some time. And so about 2 years ago, we had come to a resolution, she and I, and the Forestry Service, which if you've worked for the city, you have, the Forestry Service is like, the forester is like, in manner of like import within the city, it's like the city manager, the flood engineer, and the forester are like right there. You don't mess with any of them, you don't doubt their word of anything. And so the forester had told us, a couple of years ago, we had to get a permit to plant a fruit tree west of Broadway, which the city does not do. Currently, they do not plant fruit trees west of Broadway because they create a nuisance for wildlife. And so we got that permission done. 2 years ago, we had come to an agreement with them to plant 2 trees on property, the apple tree, which was already well into the works, and then also an apricot tree. And so that was the plan. as far as I knew it, through the entire pandemic, kind of wondered when it was gonna ever happen. Well, Forestry Service is also just about 3 people, I think, 5 maybe, and they hire contract labor. So they hired contract labor, the contract labor came out maybe 2 weeks ago, before you received your email. They dug up the apple tree, removed it, and planted an apricot tree there instead, and took the apple tree to God knows where, it tore off the labels and everything, so it had labeling, and there's a big sign there now because of the tour. But they recognized, the contractors recognized that it was probably something important, so they put it in the ground, some point unnamed east. And so when we found out about this, it was like, oh my God, because not only do we not plant apple trees, or any kind of fruit trees, west of Broadway, you never remove a work that has been planted. That just doesn't happen. Like there's policies around that. You have to get consent of, in this case, the arborist, the artist who crafted the tree. There's a whole bunch of things that we would have to go. So it was like, can we get that tree back? And so indeed we could, and Saturday or Sunday, whatever day it was, I think it was Saturday, it was a great day apparently for planting trees. It's like the apple tree was unharmed by having just previously been moved for 2 weeks at a time, or 3 weeks out of that. And they picked it up and they moved it to George Reynolds Library lawn. It's on the grounds now at the George Reynolds Library. We'll get the labels back attached. We'll get the sign moved from the tour, but it's already on an online tour. So people are showing up, reading the sign, and it's right from an apricot tree. So if anybody knows trees, they'll know it's like, this is the apple tree with 12 different or 20 different historical apple limbs grafted to it. This is an apricot tree. But nevertheless, the sign's still there. We'll get the sign moved. We'll move it out to George Reynolds.
We're gonna replace it and direct them to the George
Oh,
Reynolds.
good. So it's a happy ending for everyone in some ways. You know, when it all came down, it's like, it sounds like a funny story, but I'm not a druid, but like, I think some of my ancestors were. I have a strong sense of trees, and they are living things, and I didn't take it, we weren't gonna play like, suddenly like, musical chairs with some living things, and so really, we all kind of agreed, like, the best outcome for this is that there's a place for both of these trees, which are meaningful in their own right, to have a place to grow, and so that's where we wound up, and so this incredible apple tree will be on Old Taylor Mason now. It'll be great. The cost of getting that guy to do that for our community is around $50,000 to harvest and get all these different crafts. For us, it was nothing.
Day in the life of the library director.
You can't imagine the emails. So you can't imagine the shock on my face when somebody called me. I don't remember if it was Friday morning or Saturday morning, and said the apple tree's gone. And I'm like, what? The apple tree is gone. There's an apricot tree there. I'm like, what?
Oh, my goodness.
So it sounds like this was solved, I guess.
It was. She's very pleased. You know, so that's and we have an understanding, right? So I love the fact that somebody chose to do a living memorial on library grounds, former library. Living memorial is a living memorial. It's not a guarantee in perpetuity that an apricot tree is always going to be on the side of crime. And that's something that we had to have that conversation, because it sounded as if that never had happened before. Even though she and I had talked quite a bit 2 or 3 years ago, I think there was this kind of just this understanding that somehow there was always going to be an apricot tree there because there's a plaque. Well, you know, a plaque is not like keeping the living thing alive. And so, like, apricot trees do have a long life. There's one in my neighborhood that's well over 70 years old. They live longer than apple trees in general.
Stone fruits though are really hard to
They're really hard to
keep
climb.
growing.
Yeah, they are.
Like, we get those freezes and
Yep.
just kills them.
Gone.
I hope this one produces fruit. We'll have it in a future.
Make it jam.
Yeah.
Thanks for that story.
Yeah, so your first
Yes.
email.
Your first email, we don't even have to respond, yes.
You didn't speak to her, didn't you? Didn't you check?
No,
Oh, okay. I
No.
thought maybe, because I sent you the email.
yeah, you sent me the info, because I reached out to you saying, can we talk about it? Because I wanted to do that before we responded, and then you sent me that, and I thought.
She doesn't live in Boulder anymore. She drove by the over the weekend. Some family members may want to photograph.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're very happy with the apricot tree. The staff is. We'll explain, you know, the history of all the apple tree stuff to the George Reynolds staff now, because then they can be but the Carnegie staff, it was a nice, it was a beautiful, it was an elegant solution to put an apple tree there. And this particular apple, because we have some of the archives which they went through to determine where these historical apple trees actually were. Well, that's true. Whatever that project is, if you haven't followed it, look up some of the podcasts. They're fascinating about these people who search out historical apple trees, and in some cases, like there are myths of like markets and orchards in southern Colorado primarily. But yeah, and then somebody who like 50 years after the last one's been seen finds a tree that produces the apple that is able to re-engineer it and hopefully bring that apple back. So.
We have a 100-year-old apple tree on our property. Yep, over here.
Did you see some guy walking around sniffing?
Not yet. Not yet.
He may have been there in the dark.
I remember being in one of the buildings at CSU, one of the science buildings, and they have this long hallway with illustrations of all of these old apples, the trees and the fruit. I mean, it goes on and on and on. Yeah, it's really a loss, I think, that we don't have.
Apple orchards,
Yeah.
yeah.
So subcommittee reports, any subcommittee reports?
I have two items that aren't related to subcommittee report. Two questions. One, our minutes. When could we plan to see those, to get those approved and posted?
Hopefully in the next week or two, and I think I'll try to pass them out to you like 2 at a time.
That'd be great.
Great.
Because they're gonna be expensive.
Yeah. Okay. And then just reading about and thinking about insurance and liability. Where did we leave the issue of directors and officers insurance?
We'll have to pick that up as soon as we have the bank account.
Okay, and we know how hard that is to do.
Getting close. Yeah, we're thinking like, early to mid-July, we should have the
Yeah.
bank account, so.
Problem right now is the only thing to do.
Right.
As soon as you have the money in the bank, then we can get the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, our personal liability, yeah. Yep. Okay, that's all I wanted to ask about.
And thank you, Jennifer and Celia, for getting the copies of the advanced agenda planning. We plugged in items where we thought they could go. Obviously, this isn't fixed in stone. Just because there's one item on something doesn't mean it's the only thing for that time. That's also to plug things in. Does the 11th work for you, Kim, for the IGA discussion? Okay, that was the one. So, if you guys have questions or whatever, let me know. Jennifer is going to, or Celia is going to put this list up on the website. So we've got that piece out there. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. Well, thank you very much. Another productive meeting. Thank you again, Sharon.
Thank you.
Yes, be oriented.
Thanks.
We're going to meet at 3.